A broader perspective now on Lebanon's election and its regional implications. Bilal Saab is a senior fellow and director of the Defense and Security Program at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. I want to ask you first about the recent exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel and targets in Syria and on the Golan Heights, and whether or not you think this is a significant escalation.
Oh, I certainly do, but I'm also not shocked that this has happened. I think the Israelis have not minced words with regard to the red line that they see in Syria, which is the expansion of Iranian military power. As a matter of fact, they have now conducted more than 100 airstrikes against Iranian and Hezbollah targets inside Syria. So what happened last night really was just part of a trend. It's not really that shocking. The fact that it happened, you know, a few moments after the President of the United States declared Washington's withdrawal from the nuclear deal makes it a little bit more, you know, concerning, or the timing of it is a little bit curious. But in no way is that not inconsistent with what the Israelis have been trying to achieve in Syria.
Does this increase the risk of real war in the region, do you think?
Well, it's funny. We have an event next week about the rising risk of interstate wars in the Middle East, and war plural, not singular, because I see the possibility now of 4 of them, obviously with various costs and likelihoods for each. But one of them certainly is, especially on the minds of U.S. officials, is between Iran and Israel. I mean, as you very well said yourself, just look at the trend of escalation that's been happening in Syria and the hostilities, military hostilities between the Iranians and the Israelis, at least indirectly. And you can only make an educated guess or conclusion that it's just a matter of time before they actually clash. The other ones, you know, I see greater risk now between Iran and Saudi Arabia, given what's going on in Yemen, obviously. There's also a small likelihood, but it is still real, of conflict between the Americans and the Russians. You know, we still have 2,000 troops in Syria, and so if we were to deliberately or accidentally kill Russian soldiers next time we strike Syria, that could spiral out of control with the Russians.
Obviously, obviously any conflict in that region has an effect even among the countries that are not directly involved. I want to talk about Lebanon a little bit, because it seems to be almost in the middle of any kind of conflict between Israel and Iran. With Hezbollah appearing to at least strengthen its hand in the Lebanese election, what does that mean regionally now for Lebanon?
I'd love to, with your permission, challenge just a little bit the premise that they have strengthened their hand.
Okay.
There have been a lot of alarm bells, especially in D.C., about the electoral victory of Hezbollah, but frankly, to me, practically speaking, it changes nothing as far as the influence that Hezbollah exercises over politics in Beirut. For me, it doesn't really matter how many deputies they field in the Lebanese parliament. It doesn't really matter how many ministers they might have in the next government. All that matters is that Hezbollah has been able to and will continue to keep its weapons and its very valuable association with the Iranians. I think the United States has made some progress on challenging both tenets of Hezbollah's power, which would include its association with Iran, but also its ability to form 2 things in Lebanon: broad-based domestic alliances, so with other Lebanese parties, and also to provide for its Shia constituency in Lebanon. So how has the United States challenged both? Well, by closely engaging with the Free Patriotic Movement, the Christian FPM, and also with the Sunni Future Movement of Saad Hariri. I realize that they've lost a couple of seats here and there, but that really is still insignificant, because they will still be in the government and they're going to play a role. And as long as they are closer to Washington, that kind of a bloc will still challenge Hezbollah's supremacy over all politics in Beirut. I'll say one final thing about the decreasing ability of Hezbollah to provide for its constituency. The sanctions of the United States against Hezbollah's top backer, that's Iran, have really played a role in dwindling that sum of money that goes to Hezbollah every single year. And the fact that the United States has denied Hezbollah access to the international financial market and also to Lebanon's banks has decreased its ability to provide for its constituency. So let's just stop hyperventilating about Hezbollah's electoral performance, because at the end of the day, that's not really what matters as far as Hezbollah's influence is concerned. Win and lose in the Lebanese parliamentary elections or in elections overall are not exactly the same concept of win and lose in other democracies around the world.
So when you say being able to provide for their constituency, there have been concerns expressed about electricity, about water, about education, the kind of domestic political issues that would normally concern voters. Are those going to become increasingly more significant for Lebanese voters?
I'll be the first to admit that we should not exaggerate this, I'm going to call it dissent, that has been quite real, but still small, felt by Shia supporters of Hezbollah. Obviously in the south, there's a crushing majority, if not almost unanimous support for the organization. It is in regions, however, that include the Bekaa, Hirmel, and Baalbek, where you're starting to see, and it's been happening for some time now, you're starting to see a trend of frustration, dissatisfaction with Hezbollah because of the organization's inability to provide for them social services and others in ways that they actually do provide in the south. So these constituents in those two regions feel like there's some kind of a preferential treatment of the organization of the south that they're not getting themselves. And you're absolutely right. You mentioned the electricity and you mentioned the other social goods that they expect from the organization, but that the organization is not in a position to provide. So, it's worth monitoring this, but I'll be the last to inflate it and exaggerate it.
You've written that Lebanon is a unique place in the Middle East, and I want to ask you a bit about that. When you say it's unique, what are you driving at?
What I'm trying to drive at, and boy, this is an old argument, right? But it's worth repeating because you look around the region and you just don't see much of what Lebanon has anywhere. And by that I mean, a place that has, 18 minorities there, obviously with Christians and Muslims as the biggest two minorities, that live in peace. I mean, that's just quite unusual, frankly, in that part of the world. And also a pluralistic, tolerant society that happens to have a democratic system. Yes, as imperfect as it is, by God, it is imperfect, but that still functions and apportions political power on the basis of religion. Now, would the Lebanese love to transition into a full-fledged democracy one day? Absolutely. It is written in the Constitution. But for now, what they have, it is quite unique because it could serve as a model, okay, maybe not model, but as inspiration for other mixed societies in the region that are undergoing civil war and that would love to end those domestic conflicts by coming up with power-sharing arrangements that might resemble the Lebanese system. So that's why it is unique.
Bilal, I thank you so much for your expertise and your insight on this.
You're absolutely welcome.